Look, I am not going to sugarcoat this. My name is Commander Vex Thorin of the Galactic Enforcement Coalition, and I made the single most catastrophic mistake of my 347-year military career. I underestimated Earth. There, I said it. Happy now? But before you start laughing at me, before you sit there in your comfortable little chair sipping whatever beverage you prefer and thinking, oh, what an idiot, let me explain something. In my defense, and yes, I am fully aware how pathetic it sounds to start with. In my defense, literally every piece of intelligence we had on that mudball planet suggested it was nothing special. Average gravity, moderate temperature variations, abundant water, single unremarkable star. The humans themselves, soft-skinned, no natural armor, no venom glands, no redundant organs. They die if you punch them hard enough in the right spot, for crying out loud. So when the Galactic Council assigned me to oversee Earth's application for membership in the Coalition, I may have possibly let my disdain show a bit too clearly during the preliminary briefings. Deathworld. I had actually laughed, during the assessment meeting. Have any of you actually looked at the environmental readings? Their predators are small. Their diseases are manageable. Their natural disasters are predictable. I have seen kindergarten playground equipment on Thraxis Prime that poses more danger than anything on Earth. The council members had shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few tentacles twitched nervously. One of the Quilnari delegates made a strange whistling sound that I later learned meant, "You are about to regret saying that." But did I listen? No, I did not. In fact, I continued, because apparently I have a death wish I was not aware of at the time. I propose we send a standard diplomatic team. No military escort, no combat specialists, just regular personnel, to prove my point that Earth is, and I quote myself here because I am a fool, the most overrated death world in this entire sector. Spoiler alert. It is not. The mission began normally enough. We arrived in Earth's solar system on a Tuesday, which the humans apparently consider an unlucky day for reasons that still escape me. Our ship, the luminous Endeavor, descended through Earth's atmosphere without incident. We landed in a location the humans called Montana, which I was assured was one of the safer regions on the planet. Our diplomatic team consisted of myself, my second-in-command Lieutenant Krell, our xenobiologist Dr. Marin, our communications specialist Talon, and two junior officers whose names I honestly cannot remember, because, well, you will understand why soon enough. The human delegation met us at the landing site. Their leader was a woman named Margaret Holloway, and she had this smile on her face that I now recognize as the universal expression for, "Oh, you sweet summer child, you have no idea what is about to happen to you." "Welcome to Earth, Commander Thorin," she said, extending her hand in that bizarre human greeting ritual where they grab each other's appendages and shake them. "We are so pleased to have you here." "Yes. Well," I replied, not bothering to hide my boredom. "Let us make this quick, shall we? I have 17 other planetary assessments to complete this cycle." Her smile widened. "Oh, I think you will find that Earth requires a more thorough evaluation than you might expect." "I doubt that very much," I said. Famous last words, right? The first indication that I had miscalculated came approximately 47 minutes after landing. Dr. Myron, who had wandered away from the landing site to collect plant samples, came running back at a speed I did not know his species was capable of achieving. "Commander," he wheezed, his respiratory sacs inflating and deflating rapidly. "Commander, we have a situation." "What is it?" I sighed, already annoyed at the interruption. There was a creature. Large, brown, with massive claws and teeth. It stood on two legs and made a terrifying sound, and I barely escaped with my life. Margaret Holloway glanced in the direction he had come from and nodded casually. "Oh, that was probably just a grizzly bear. They are pretty common around here. Did you get too close to her cubs?" "Her cubs?" Dr. Mirin shrieked. "You mean there are more of those monsters?" "Well, yeah," Margaret said, as if this was the most normal thing in the universe. "It is June. Cubs are usually born in January or February, so they would be about 4 or 5 months old now. Mothers get pretty protective. You are lucky she just warned you off instead of actually attacking." I stared at her. "Let me understand this correctly. You have enormous carnivorous predators that are aggressive, territorial and protective of their young, and they just roam freely. You do not hunt them to extinction. You do not keep them in containment facilities." Margaret looked at me like I had just suggested she murder her own grandmother. "Why would we do that? They were here first. We just respect their space," I repeated flatly. These creatures that, according to my officer, are large enough and aggressive enough to be classified as apex predators. They are apex predators, she confirmed cheerfully. Along with mountain lions, wolves, coyotes, alligators, crocodiles, polar bears, black bears, great white sharks, tiger sharks, bull sharks, orcas, and well, a bunch of other things depending on which ecosystem you are talking about. My translator implant must have malfunctioned, because I could have sworn she just listed more than a dozen different species of apex predators. On one planet. That is not how ecosystems work. You cannot have that many apex predators in one biosphere without complete ecological collapse. Your planet has multiple apex predators. I asked slowly. Sure, she shrugged. Different environments, different predators. Makes sense, right? No, it did not make sense. Nothing about this made sense, but it was about to get so much worse. Lieutenant Krell was the next casualty. We had moved to what the humans called a visitor center, which was apparently a building dedicated to teaching people about the local environment. There were displays about the various flora and fauna, and Krell, being thorough, was reading each one carefully. He went very still in front of one particular display. "Commander," he said quietly. "Commander, please come look at this." I walked over, irritated at yet another interruption. "What is it now?" He pointed at an information placard. It featured an image of a small insect, black with yellow stripes. "This creature," he said, his voice shaking slightly, "produces a neurotoxic venom that causes extreme pain, swelling, and in some cases death." "Okay," I said. "So it is a dangerous insect. I assume they are rare?" Margaret, who had followed us inside, laughed. Actually laughed. "Rare? No, yellow jackets are everywhere. Super common, everywhere," Krell repeated faintly. "Oh yeah. Plus we have got hornets, wasps, fire ants, bullet ants, black widows, brown recluses, scorpions, centipedes." She ticked them off on her fingers like she was listing flavors of ice cream, not venomous creatures that could kill you. "And your people," I said slowly. "Just live with all of these things? Constantly?" "Well, what else would we do?" she asked, genuinely puzzled. I did not have an answer for that. On every other civilized world in the Coalition, dangerous fauna is either eradicated, contained, or genetically modified to be harmless. The concept of simply living with dozens of species that could kill you at any moment was absolutely insane. We moved on to the next display, which featured an innocuous-looking plant with clusters of white flowers. "This is water hemlock," Margaret explained. "It is one of the most violently toxic plants in North America. If you eat it, you will experience seizures, violent convulsions, and death within hours. There is no antidote." "And you let these grow freely?" Dr. Mirren asked, his voice pitched higher than normal. "I mean, we try to remove them from areas where livestock graze," Margaret said. "But yeah, they grow wild pretty much everywhere there is water." Talon, our communications specialist, had pulled out his data pad and was frantically taking notes. "So, let me make sure I understand," he said. "Your planet has numerous apex predators, countless venomous insects and arachnids, and poisonous plants everywhere, and your species adapted to deal with all of this." "I guess so," Margaret said. "I mean, we teach kids which plants not to touch and which animals to avoid. Common sense stuff." Common sense. She called surviving in what was clearly a nightmare hellscape common sense, but we had seen nothing yet. Nothing. The true horror began when Margaret suggested we take a short hike to see the local scenery. Being the arrogant fool that I am, I agreed, thinking that surely nothing could be worse than what we had already learned. Reader? I was wrong. So wrong. We had been walking for maybe 20 minutes when the weather, which had been sunny and pleasant, suddenly changed. Dark clouds rolled in with a speed that seemed physically impossible. The temperature dropped at least 10 degrees in a matter of minutes. The wind picked up, bending trees at angles that looked structurally unsound. "We should head back," Margaret said, her casual demeanor finally showing a hint of concern. "Storm is coming in faster than expected." "A storm?" I scoffed. "Surely we can handle a little precipitation." She gave me that look again, that "you poor ignorant alien" look. "Commander, this is not just rain. This is a supercell." "A what?" Thunder cracked overhead so loud that I felt it in my bones. Lightning split the sky in jagged patterns that seemed to defy physics. And then the hail started. Now I had seen hail before. On Kilmar 7 they occasionally get ice pellets during their winter season. Small things, about the size of a grain of sand. Inconvenient but harmless. This was not that. These were chunks of ice the size of my fist falling from the sky at terminal velocity. each one capable of cracking skulls and shattering bones. "Run," Margaret shouted. And suddenly she was sprinting back toward the visitor center with a speed and agility that belied her supposedly fragile human physiology. We ran. My entire team ran faster than we had ever run in our lives, dodging ice missiles from the sky while thunder shook the ground beneath our feet and lightning turned the world into a strobe light of terror. One of the junior officers, I think his name was Peck, got hit by a particularly large hailstone. He went down hard, crying out in pain. Without hesitation, Margaret turned back, grabbed him by his uniform and dragged him along with a strength that should have been impossible for someone of her size and build. We made it back to the visitor center just as the hail intensified. The sound of ice hammering against the roof was deafening. Through the windows we watched as the storm unleashed hell upon the landscape. Trees bent nearly horizontal. Debris flew through the air like projectiles. The sky had turned a sickly green color that made my survival instincts scream danger in every language my brain understood. "Is this normal?" Talon asked, his entire body trembling. "For Montana in June. Pretty normal, yeah," Margaret said, checking on Peck's injuries with practiced efficiency. "Looks like a mild concussion and some bruising. You will be fine." "Mild?" Peck wailed. "I was struck by a projectile from the sky." "Yeah, sorry about that," Margaret said, not sounding sorry at all. "Should have moved faster." The storm raged for another 40 minutes. When it finally passed, the landscape looked like a war zone. Leaves and branches littered the ground. Small craters marked where the largest hailstones had impacted. One tree had been split completely in half by lightning. "So," Margaret said brightly, "still think Earth is overrated?" I did not answer. I was too busy re-evaluating every decision I had made that led me to this moment. But the universe apparently was not done humiliating me yet. Not even close. After the hailstorm incident, which I am officially classifying as a traumatic experience in my military record, I made what I thought was a reasonable request. I asked Margaret if we could perhaps conduct the rest of our assessment from the safety of an indoor facility, preferably one with reinforced walls, and a basement. Maybe a bunker. She agreed, but with that smile. That terrible, knowing smile that I had come to recognize as the harbinger of my continued suffering. "Sure thing, Commander," she said. "We can head to Billings. Nice city, plenty of indoor facilities. We will take the highway. Should be a relaxing drive." Relaxing. She used the word relaxing. I should have known better. The vehicle she led us to was what humans call a van, which is apparently a common mode of transportation on Earth. It seemed sturdy enough, though I noticed it lacked any sort of defensive shielding or weapons systems. When I pointed this out, Margaret laughed so hard she had to lean against the vehicle for support. "Why would a civilian van need weapons?" She wheezed between laughs. "For protection," I said, confused by the question. "From predators. From hostile forces. From environmental hazards." "Commander," she said, wiping tears from her eyes, "we are just driving on a highway. What do you think is going to happen?" Everything. Everything was going to happen. We had been driving for approximately 30 minutes, and I was just beginning to think that perhaps, maybe, this one human activity might actually be safe. When Lieutenant Krell, who was sitting by a window, suddenly made a noise I can only describe as a whimper of existential dread. "Commander," he whispered. "Commander, look at the speed." I looked at the dashboard display. We were traveling at 95 kilometers per hour. On a road. A simple paved road with no guidance rails. No automated controls, no safety protocols whatsoever, and Margaret was controlling this multi-ton metal projectile with nothing but her soft, fleshy human hands and feet. This is the normal speed?" I asked, my voice slightly higher pitched than I would have liked. "For the highway, yeah," Margaret said casually, as if she was not hurtling us toward potential death at a velocity that would be considered reckless on most civilized worlds. "Speed limit is 80, but everyone goes a bit over. Everyone breaks the law." Dr. Mirren asked faintly. "It is not really breaking the law if everyone does it," she replied with a logic that made absolutely no sense. Then, without warning, she pressed a lever and the van moved into a different lane. There was another vehicle, another massive metal death trap, traveling in the opposite direction at an equally insane speed, separated from us by less than 2 meters of empty space and a painted line on the ground. A painted line. Not a barrier. Not a force field. A line made of paint. "You people are insane," Talon announced, gripping his seat so hard his knuckles had turned a pale blue. "Completely, utterly insane." "What? Why?" Margaret glanced at him in the mirror, taking her eyes off the road while traveling at 95 kilometers per hour. "Watch where you are going." I shouted, my military composure completely abandoned. She laughed and returned her attention to the road. Relax, Commander. I have been driving for 23 years. Never had an accident yet. Krell muttered darkly. Never had an accident yet. As if the universe heard him and decided to make things worse, which seems to be Earth's primary function. A creature suddenly bounded across the road directly in front of us. It was enormous, with massive antlers and long spindly legs that seemed far too thin to support its body mass. Margaret slammed her foot on the brake pedal. The van made a horrible squealing sound as it decelerated rapidly. My internal organs, which are not designed for such sudden changes in velocity, attempted to exit my body through my throat. We stopped mere inches from the creature, which looked at us with the blank, unconcerned expression of an animal that clearly did not understand how close it had come to death, or perhaps it did understand and simply did not care, because it was a creature from Earth, and everything on Earth apparently has a death wish. Moose, Margaret said calmly, as if she had not just merely killed us all. Big one too. Male, probably about 600 or 700 kilograms. The moose, because apparently that is what nightmare fuel is called on this planet, stared at us for a long moment. Then, and I swear I am not making this up, it approached the van. It walked right up to Margaret's window and looked inside with dark, soulless eyes. Do not make eye contact, Margaret whispered. And nobody move. We froze. The moose pressed its massive nose against the window, leaving a smear of moisture on the glass. Its antlers, each point sharp enough to impale, scraped against the roof of the van with a sound like nails on metal. Why is it doing that? I hissed. Curious, probably, Margaret whispered back. Or establishing dominance. Hard to tell with moose. What happens if it decides it does not like us? Dr. Mirren asked in the smallest voice I have ever heard him use. Well, if it charges, it will probably total the van. Might flip us. Moose attacks are actually pretty dangerous. They kill more people in North America than bears do. They what? Krell yelped. Shh. Margaret shushed him. Do not startle it. The moose, having apparently decided we were either not a threat or not interesting enough to kill, finally wandered off into the forest. We all released the breath we had been holding. Okay, Margaret said cheerfully, starting the van again. That was exciting. Usually you only see moose like that in the fall. Usually? I repeated weakly. This happens usually? Oh sure. Moose, elk, deer, antelope, bighorn sheep. Sometimes cattle get loose. Once had a buffalo in the road, but that was pretty rare. I have been in active combat situations that were less stressful than Earth transportation. We finally, mercifully arrived in Billings without further incident, though my cardiovascular system may never fully recover. Margaret led us to what she called a research facility, where we could review Earth's official application for coalition membership in a controlled environment. The facility was nice, climate-controlled, comfortable seating, refreshment stations. For the first time since landing on this nightmare planet, I allowed myself to relax slightly. That was my mistake. Relaxing on Earth is always a mistake. We had been reviewing documentation for about an hour when the building started shaking. Not violently, but enough to notice. Equipment rattled on shelves. The liquid in my beverage container rippled in concentric circles. Earthquake, someone shouted from down the hall. I leaped to my feet, my fight or flight response, which had been getting quite the workout lately, immediately choosing flight. Evacuation protocols. Everyone out of the building. Margaret held up a hand. Relax, Commander. It is just a little tremor, probably a 3.5, maybe a 4. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to... I could not even finish the sentence. Your planet's crust is literally shifting beneath us. Yeah, Earth does that sometimes, she said, utterly unconcerned. Tectonic plates and all that. As long as it stays under a 5, we are fine. And if it goes over a 5, Talon demanded, then we get under a doorway or a desk and ride it out, she shrugged. But we are not near any major fault lines here, so it is pretty unlikely. The shaking stopped after about 20 seconds. 20 seconds of my life that I will never get back, during which I contemplated every decision that led me to a career where I could die because the ground decided to spontaneously move. Your people, I said slowly, sitting back down on shaking legs. Just live with the knowledge that the ground might start shaking at any moment. I mean, it is not constant, Margaret said. Depending on where you live, you might only feel a few earthquakes a year, or none at all. Few per year, Dr. Marin repeated. And you consider this acceptable? What is the alternative? She asked, genuinely. Stop living. The horrible thing was, she had a point. These humans, these soft, fragile creatures with no natural defenses, had simply accepted that their planet was actively trying to kill them, and decided to keep living anyway. It was simultaneously the bravest and stupidest thing I had ever encountered. That evening, Margaret suggested we experience a traditional human meal at a local restaurant. Still rattled from the day's events, but not wanting to appear weak, I agreed. How dangerous could eating be? Very, very dangerous. Because this is Earth, and nothing here makes sense. The restaurant was pleasant enough. Wooden furniture, dim lighting, various decorative items on the walls, including, disturbingly, the mounted head of a deceased animal. When I asked about it, Margaret explained it was a trophy from a successful hunt, which raised about 17 new questions I decided I did not want answers to. A server, a young human male with colorful markings on his arms that Margaret later explained were tattoos, approached our table with various plates of food. "Got your steaks here," he said, setting down plates in front of Margaret and me. "Medium rare, like you asked." I looked down at the food. It was meat, clearly, but it was red. Still red, with liquid pooling around it that looked suspiciously like blood. Is this cooked?" I asked carefully. "Yeah, medium rare," the server confirmed. "Still pink in the middle. That is how most people like it." "You eat partially raw meat?" I stated, not asked. "Well, yeah," Margaret said, cutting into her steak with obvious enjoyment. "Cooking it all the way through makes it tough and dry. Medium rare is the sweet spot." "But the bacteria," Dr. Marin protested. "The parasites. The pathogens." Margaret swallowed her bite and smiled. "Our stomachs can handle it. Humans have been eating meat for millions of years. We have got pretty robust digestive systems." "Robust," I echoed faintly, staring at my plate with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Try it," she encouraged. "It is really good." Against my better judgment and because my pride would not let me refuse, I took a small bite. It was, I had to admit, delicious. But the knowledge that I was consuming partially raw flesh from an earth creature made the experience deeply unsettling. Then the server brought out something Margaret had ordered as a special treat. It was a collection of vegetables, including small green spheres that she identified as jalapenos. "These are spicy," she warned. "Might be too much for you." Challenge accepted. I was a military commander. I had survived hailstorms, moose encounters, and earthquake tremors. I could handle whatever spicy meant. Reader, I could not handle whatever spicy meant. I bit into one of the small green spheres. For approximately 2 seconds nothing happened. Then my mouth exploded into flames. Not metaphorical flames. It felt like actual fire consuming my oral cavity from the inside out. My eyes began watering uncontrollably. My respiratory system attempted to shut down. I made sounds that I am not proud of.
"Water," I gasped.
"Give me water." "Oh no," Margaret said, though she was clearly trying not to laugh. "Water makes it worse. Here, have some milk." She handed me a glass of white liquid that I desperately gulped down. It helped, marginally, though my mouth still felt like I had angered a fire deity. "What?" I wheezed. "Was that?" "Jalapeno pepper," she said. "And honestly, that is one of the milder ones. We have got habaneros, ghost peppers, Carolina Reapers. Some of them can actually cause physical harm." "And you eat these willingly?" Krell asked, his face showing a mixture of awe and disgust. "Sure," Margaret shrugged. "Adds flavor. Plus, the pain releases endorphins. Makes you feel good afterward." "You eat things that hurt you because it makes you feel good afterward," I said slowly. "When you put it that way, it does sound kind of weird," she admitted. "Kind of weird." Earth specialized in understatement, apparently. The final straw, the moment that truly broke me, came the next morning. We were preparing to return to the luminous Endeavor, having completed what Margaret insisted was a very basic surface-level introduction to Earth. If this was basic, I did not want to know what comprehensive looked like. As we walked to the van for our return trip to the landing site, something small landed on my arm. I looked down to see a tiny insect, black with wings, sitting calmly on my uniform. "Do not swat it," Margaret said quickly. "That is a honeybee. If you kill it, it might release pheromones that attract the rest of its hive." "Its hive," I repeated. "As in more of these creatures. About 60,000 more, give or take," she confirmed. "Just hold still and let it fly away on its own." I stood frozen, this tiny creature on my arm, knowing that one wrong move could result in 60,000 stinging insects descending upon me. This, I realized, was Earth in microcosm. Even the smallest, most innocent-looking things could kill you if you did not treat them with proper respect. The bee eventually flew away. I released a breath I did not know I was holding. So, Margaret said, as we climbed into the van. When can we expect to hear back about our coalition membership? I looked at her. This human, this representative of a species that lived on a planet that was actively, constantly trying to murder them, who ate poisonous plants for fun and partially cooked meat for dinner, who drove metal death machines at suicidal speeds separated by painted lines, who shrugged off earthquakes and hailstorms like they were minor inconveniences, who had somehow impossibly not only survived but thrived in conditions that would drive any sane species to extinction. Your application, I said carefully, will be approved, with a significant revision to Earth's danger classification. Oh good, she beamed. What classification did you give us? Extreme hazard level 9, I replied. One level below the classification we reserve for planets that are actively on fire. She laughed. That seems a bit dramatic, do you not think? At that moment we drove past a sign that read War Whirling Rattlesnake Area. No, I said firmly. No, I do not think it is dramatic at all. We made it back to the luminous Endeavor without further incident. Though without further incident, on Earth, apparently still includes seeing 3 more potentially lethal animals, experiencing weather that changed drastically 4 times, having to stop because a herd of bison decided the road was a good place to stand around doing nothing. As our ship lifted off, as the blue and green nightmare of a planet receded below us, I made a solemn vow. I would approve Earth's coalition membership. I would classify it as one of the most dangerous inhabited worlds in known space. I would recommend that any visiting species undergo extensive briefings and safety training before setting foot on the surface, and I would never ever return to that planet again. My legs had not stopped shaking for 3 days. Even now, back in the safety of my office aboard Coalition Station 7, I sometimes wake up in the middle of my sleep cycle in a cold sweat, convinced I hear the sound of hailstones or the approach of a moose. Lieutenant Krell has filed for a transfer to any assignment that does not involve Earth. Dr. Marin has developed a nervous tic. Talon refuses to eat any food he did not personally scan for toxins. The junior officers have both requested extended medical leave. As for me, well, I wrote my report. I classified Earth as I said I would. And when a junior officer had the audacity to suggest that perhaps my assessment was exaggerated, I simply pulled up the video footage from our visit and told him to watch. All of it. He filed for transfer before finishing the first day of recordings. The humans joined the coalition 3 months later. They arrived at the welcome ceremony in their typical fashion, cheerful and friendly and utterly oblivious to the fact that half the delegates were terrified of them. Margaret found me in the crowd. She smiled that smile. The one I now recognized as uniquely human. The one that said, "We have survived things you cannot imagine, and we are going to keep surviving, and there is nothing in this universe that frightens us because we come from Earth, and Earth is so much worse than anything else could ever be." "Good to see you, Commander," she said. "Thanks again for approving our application. I hope your visit was not too stressful." Not too stressful. The woman had exposed me to enough trauma to fill a psychiatric textbook, and she hoped it was not too stressful. "It was enlightening," I managed to say. "Well, you will have to come back sometime," she said. "We barely scratched the surface, did not even get to show you the ocean, or the hurricanes, or the volcanoes, or the deserts, or the—" "I will consider it," I lied, already mentally composing a memo explaining why I was suddenly far too busy with other assignments to ever visit Earth again. She laughed and walked away, and I watched her go. This human, this creature from a Deathworld that made other Deathworlds look like vacation resorts, and I thought about something my mentor had told me many years ago. Never underestimate a species, he had said. Especially not based on their appearance. The most dangerous creatures in the universe often look the most harmless. I had thought he was being philosophical, metaphorical. He was being literal. He was talking about humans. And now, as I file my final report, as I add my official recommendation that Earth be granted full coalition membership along with a list of safety warnings longer than most species' entire membership applications, I have learned my lesson. Earth is not an overrated Deathworld. Earth is possibly the most accurately rated Deathworld in existence, except that our rating scale does not go high enough to properly classify it. Earth should have its own category, its own warning label that simply reads "Proceed with extreme caution" and possibly not at all. My legs still shake sometimes when I think about it, and I still cannot stand up straight without remembering the feeling of that van braking suddenly to avoid the moose. The way my body was thrown forward against the safety restraint, the way my spine compressed in a way it was never designed to compress. The humans called it whiplash. They said it was pretty common and usually not serious. Usually not serious. On Earth, Even the injuries have an acceptable casualty rate. So yes, I mocked Earth as an overrated death world, and now I cannot stand up straight without my back reminding me exactly how wrong I was. The humans, naturally, find this hilarious.